Hey, hey, just waiting for the timer to start. Welcome back to Adult Brain. I'm Graham, one of the narrators. This is a rough and raw live read of Ragnarok, The Age of Fire and Gravel. There's Mocha. Go on, Mocha. Go to your seat. Come on. This will be part 3, The Legends, chapter 5, The Conflagration of Phaeton, and part of chapter 6, because chapter 6 is really long. I don't think I can go that long. We'll see how it goes. Other Legends of the Conflagration. And this is Ragnarok, The Age of Fire and Gravel. It's a book by Ignatius Donnelly back in 1883, from back in 1883. And it's this is where it gets fun, talking about the legends as opposed to the science of the drift and all that kind of stuff, all the geology, which was if you go back to our live tab on the channel, uh, you'll catch the beginning of this book. So here we are, chapter 5. Let me share the screen. Entire screen. Let me just do a little test here, make sure that it's not going to drop too low. All right. What happened there? Huh. Okay. Check. Chapter 5, The Conflagration of Phaeton. Now let us turn to the mythology of the Latins, as preserved in the pages of Ovid, one of the greatest of the poets of ancient Rome. Here we have the burning of the world involved in the myth of Phaeton, son of Phoebus, Apollo, the sun, who drives the chariot of his father. He cannot control the horses of the sun. They run away with him. They come so near the earth as to set it on fire, and Phaeton is at last killed by Jove, as he killed Typhon in the Greek legends, to save heaven and earth from complete and common ruin. This is the story of the conflagration as treated by a civilized mind, explained by a myth, and decorated with the flowers and foliage of poetry. We shall see many things in the narrative of Ovid which strikingly confirm our theory. Phaeton, to prove that he is really the son of Phoebus, the sun, demands of his parent the right to drive his chariot for one day. The sun god reluctantly consents, not without many pleadings that the infatuated and rash boy would give up his inconsiderate ambition. Phaeton persists. The old man says, "Even the ruler of vast Olympus, who hurls the ruthless bolts with his terrific right hand, cannot guide this chariot. And yet, what have we greater than Jupiter? The first part of the road is steep, and such as the horses, though fresh in the morning, can hardly climb. In the middle of the heaven, it is high aloft, whence it is often a source of fear, even to myself, to look down upon the sea and the earth, and my breast trembles with fearful apprehensions. The last stage is a steep descent, and requires a sure command of the horses. Besides, the heavens are carried round with a constant rotation, and carrying with them the lofty stars, and whirl them with rapid revolution. Against this I have to contend, and that force which overcomes all other things does not overcome me, and I am carried in a contrary direction to the rapid world." Here we seem to have a glimpse of some higher and older learning mixed with the astronomical errors of the day. Ovid supposes the rapid world to revolve one way, while the sun appears to move another. But Phaeton insists on undertaking the dread task. The doors of Aurora are opened, her halls filled with roses. The stars disappear. The hours yoke the horses, filled with the juice of ambrosia. The father anoints the face of his son with a hallowed drug that he may the better endure the great heat. The reins are handed him, and the fatal race begins. Phoebus has advised him not to drive too high, or thou wilt set on fire the signs of the heavens, the constellations, nor too low, or he will consume the earth. I just got to quickly check this next paragraph here. There's some pronunciations that I got, but it's like once you're reading it live, it's hard to get them right off the bat. There are weird, not weird, but they're the old Greek ones. Pyros, and Eos. Skaldes, let's see here. Eos, yeah, Eos, Pyroes, Phlegon. All right, here we go. Check. Whoops. In the meantime, the swift Pyros and Eos and Aethon, the horses of the sun, and Phlegon, the fourth, fill the air with neighings, sending forth flames, and beat the barriers with their feet. They take the road. They cleave the resisting clouds, and raised aloft by their wings, they pass by the east winds that have arisen from the same parts. But the weight of Phaeton was light, and such as the horses of the sun could not feel, and the yoke was deficient of its wonted weight. Soon as the steeds had perceived that they... Uh-oh, that was a mistake. Undo. Uh-oh. Redo. Let's double check this. As the steeds had perceived that they... Yeah. Okay. That happens when I hit two keys at the same time. It goes back, and sometimes I delete like minutes, and I have to figure out how to get it back. This seems like small printing for some reason. Check. Soon as the steeds had perceived this, they rush on and leave the beaten track and run. Soon as the steeds had perceived this, they rush on and leave the beaten track and not run in the order in which they did before. He himself becomes alarmed and knows not which way to turn the reins instructed to him. Entrusted. Where is he? He himself becomes alarmed and knows not which way to turn the reins entrusted to him, nor does he know where the way is, nor, if he did know, could he control them. Then for the first time did the cold triones grow warm with sunbeams and attempt in vain to be dipped in the sea that was forbidden to them. And the serpent, which is situate next to the icy pole, being before torpid with cold and formidable to no one, grew warm and regained new rage for the heat. And they say that thou, Boetes, scoured off the mighty... Boetes. I had this one correct, but now when it comes time to it, it's tough. Boetes. New rage for the heat. Check. Where am I at here? Strange to say that. And they say that thou, Boetes, scoured off in a mighty bustle, although thou wert but slow, and thy cart hindered thee. But when from the height of the skies the unhappy Phaeton looked down upon the earth lying far, very far beneath, he grew pale, and his knees shook with a sudden terror. And in a light so great, darkness overspread his eyes. And now he could wish that he could never touch the horses. And now he could wish that he had never touched the horses of his father. And now he is sorry that he knew his descent and prevailed in his request, now desiring to be called the son of Merops. What can he do? He is stupefied. He neither lets go of the reins nor is able to control them. In this fright, too, he sees strange objects scattered everywhere in various parts of the heavens, and the forms of huge wild beasts. There is a spot where the scorpion bends his arms into two curves, and with his tail and claws bending on either side, he extends his limbs through the space of two signs of the zodiac. As soon as the youth beheld him, wet with the sweat of black venom and threatening wounds with the barbed point of his tail, bereft of sense, he let go the reins in a chill of horror. Compare the course which Ovid tells us Phaeton pursued through the constellations, past the great serpent and Bootes, and close to the venomous scorpion, with the orbit of Donati's comet in 1858, as given in Schellen's great work. And here's a picture of the course of Donati's comet. Check. The path described by Ovid shows that the comet came from the north part of the heavens, and this agrees with what we know of the drift. The markings indicate that it came from the north. The horses now range at large. They go through the air in an The horses now range at large. They go through the air of an unknown region. They rush on the stars fixed in the sky. They approach the earth. The moon, too, wonders that her brother's horses run lower than her own, and the scorched clouds send forth smoke. As each region is most elevated, it's caught by the flames and cleft. It makes vast chasms, its moisture being carried away. The grass grows pale. The trees with their foliage are burned up, and the dry standing corn affords fuel for its own destruction. But I am complaining of trifling ills. Great cities perish together with their fortifications, and the flames turn whole nations into ashes. Woods together with mountains are on fire. Athos burns, and the Sicilian Taurus and Tomulus. Tmolus. Let me just double check that. TML. Yeah, I've never seen that. TMOLU. Oh, Tom. TMOLUS. Tamales. Tamo. Classical. Both letters are sounded. Tamolus. That seems weird. Let me do that again. Athos burns. Eta and Ida. Eta. Oeta. Let me double check that one first, too. I missed these ones. Eta. I like Eta, but it's Eta. That's hard to remember. Fire. All right. Okay, here we go. Athos burns, and the Sicilian Taurus, and Tmolus, and Eta, and Ida, now dry but once most famed for its springs, and Helicon, the resort of the virgin muses, and Haemus, not yet called Agrarian. Etna burns intensely with redoubled flames, and Parnassus with its two summits, and Eryx and Cynthius. Cynthus? Etna? Eryx, Cynthus, and Orthrus. All right. Etna burns intensely with redoubled flames, and Parnassus, with its two summits, and Eryx, and Cynthus, and Orthrus. Etna burns intensely with redoubled flames, and Parnassus, with its two summits, and Eryx, and Cynthus, and Orthrus, and Rhodope. I should have fucking checked that. Excuse my language. Rhodope. It's going to be. Rhodope. It's these dashes that do it. Rhodope. That's my guess. Rhodope. Yeah. All right. Let's do that one more time. Rhodope. Check. Etna burns intensely with redoubled flames, and Parnassus with its two summits, and Eryx, and Cynthus, and Orthrus, and Rhodope. Rhodope. After all that, I got it wrong. Etna burns intensely with redoubled flames, and Parnassus with its two summits, and Eryx, and Cynthus, and Orthrus, and Rhodope, at length to be despoiled of its snows, and Mimas, and Dindima, and Macali, and Citharon, created for the sacred rites. Nor does its cold avail even Scythia. Caucasus is on fire, and Ossa, with Pindus, and Olympus, greater than them both, and the lofty Alps, and the cloud-bearing Apennines. I better double-check that one. Apennines. Apennines? What's the guess? Apennines. 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 Caucasus. Caucasus. Okay, I'm going to go back to that. Caucasus. Once we get through this, we'll get swinging again here. Caucasus. There it is. Caucasus. Apennines. Apennines. Caucasus. Caucasus is on fire, and Ossa with Pindus, and Olympus, greater than them both, and the lofty Alps, and the cloud-bearing Apennines. Then indeed Phaeton holds beholds. Then indeed Phaeton beholds the world set on fire on all sides, and he cannot endure heat so great, and he inhales with his mouth scorching air, as though from a deep furnace, and perceives his own chariot to be on fire. And neither is he able now to bear the ashes and the emitted embers, and on every side he is involved in a heated smoke, covered with a pitchy. Thank you. Yeah, somebody's commenting on Donnelly's work. I'm trying not to pay attention to the chats here, though. And neither is he able now to bear. Covered with a pitchy. Oh yeah, covered with a pitchy darkness. Check. Just a quick comment about Ignatius Donnelly's. Check his fiction book called The Caesar's Column, which we have on audio. Caesar's Column, it's called. It's really interesting. It's kind of like a dystopia, utopia type thing. Got some great speeches in there and some interesting predictions of technology. Covered with a pitchy darkness, he knows not whither he is going, nor where he is, and is hurried away at the pleasure of the winged steeds. They believe that it was. See here. They believe Ethiopians contracted their black hue. Oh boy. They believe that it was then that the nations of the Ethiopians contracted their black hue, the blood being attracted into the surface of the body. Then was Libya, Sahara, made dry by the heat, the moisture being carried off. Then with disheveled hair the nymphs lamented the springs and the lakes. Boeotia bewails Dirce, Argos anymore, and Emphire, the waters of Perine. Okay, this is a tough read. Oh boy. Why did I volunteer for this one? Okay, Argos, Anemone, Aminime. That's going to be Aminmone. Aminmone. I'm going to double check that one because the way I think it's pronounced, it's going to be very difficult. Aminmone. Amimone. See, I knew it. Amimone. Argos, Amimone, and Aphire, the waters of Perine. Maybe that's not Perine. Pyrenees. Yeah, Pyrenees. Aminime, Pyrenees. Okay, this is going to be tough. Lakes. Aminime. Boeotia bewails Dirce, Argos, Aminime, and of fire the waters of Pyrenees. Nor do rivers that have banks distant remain secure. Tanais smokes in the midst of its waters, and the aged Peneus and Teuthranians Caicus. Oh boy. I think I'm going to skip this part. I'm making note. Let me just make a note here quickly and I'll come back to this. I'm getting to be a little bit self-conscious about all the pronunciations and how slow this is going to go. I missed that whole. I tried to go ahead and catch some of them. Usually you kind of know, but it's really hard to just sort of go through sentence by sentence. Of its waters, and the aged Peneus and Teuthranians Caicus. Oh boy. Okay, let me go back here and see where I'm going to delete this from. Tanais. So the Babylonian Euphrates, the Caicus and rapid Ismenus. The Babylonian Euphrates too was on fire. Orontes was in flame, and the swift Thermodon and Ganges and Phasis and Ister. Alpheus boils, the banks of Sperchius burn, and the gold which Tagus carries with its stream melts in the Thames, in the flames. The river birds, too, which made famous the Maeonian banks with song, grew hot in the middle of Caister. The Nile, affrighted, fled to the remotest parts of the earth and concealed his head, which still lies hid. His 7 last mouths are empty, 7 channels without any streams. The same fate dries up in the Ismarian rivers, Hibius together with Strymon, and the Hesperian streams, the Rhine, the Rhone, and the Po, and the Tiber, to which was promised the sovereignty of the world. I'm going to make a note of the timestamp and come back and get this later. Actually, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Check. In other words, according to these Roman traditions here poetized, the heat dried up the rivers of Europe, Asia, and Africa. In short, of all the known world. Ovid continues, all the ground bursts asunder, and through the chinks the light penetrates into Tartarus and startles the infernal king with his spouse. We have seen that during the Drift Age, the great clefts in the earth, the fjords in the north of Europe and America, occurred, and we shall see hereafter that, according to a Central American legend, the red rocks boiled up through the earth at this time. The ocean, too, is contracted, says Ovid, and that which lately was sea is a surface of parched sand, and the mountains which the deep sea has covered start up and increase the number of the scattered Cyclades, a cluster of islands in the Aegean Sea surrounding Delos, as though with a circle, whence their name. The fishes sink to the bottom, and the crooked dolphins do not care to raise themselves on the surface into the air as usual. The bodies of sea calves float lifeless on their backs on the top of the water. The story, too, is that even Nereus himself and Doris and their daughters lay hid in the heated caverns. All this could scarcely have been imagined, and yet it agrees precisely with what we cannot but believe to have been the facts. Here we have an explanation of how that vast body of vapor, which afterward constituted great snowbanks and ice sheets and river torrents, rose into the air. Science tells us that to make a world-wrapping ice sheet 2 miles thick, all the waters of the ocean must have been evaporated. To make 1 mile thick would take 1/2 of the waters of the globe. And here we find this Roman poet who is repeating the legends of his race and who knew nothing about a drift age or an ice age, telling us that the water boiled in the streams, that the bottom of the Mediterranean lay exposed, a bed of dry sand, that the fish floated dead on the surface or fled away to the great depths of the ocean, and that even the sea gods hid in the heated caverns. Ovid continues, 3 times had Neptune ventured with stern countenance to thrust his arms out of the water. 3 times he was unable to endure the scorching heat of the air. This is no doubt a reminiscence of those human beings who sought safety in the water, retreating downward into the deep as the heat reduced its level, occasionally lifting up their heads to breathe the torrid and tainted air. However, the genial earth, as she was surrounded by the sea, amid the waters of the main, the ocean, the springs dried up on every side which had hidden themselves in the bowels of their cavernous parent, burnt up, lifted up all her productive fate. Let me do that again. Springs dried up on every... Check, check, check. The springs dried up on every side which had hidden themselves in the bowels of their cavernous parent, burnt up, lifted up her all-productive face as far as her neck, and placed her hand to her forehead. Then, shaking all things with a vast trembling, she sank down a little and retired below the spot where she wont to be. Here we are reminded of the bridge Bifrost, spoken of in the last chapter, which, as I have shown, was probably a prolongation of land reaching from Atlantis to Europe, and which the Norse legends tells us sank down under the feet of the forces of Muspelheim. Oh boy, Muspelheim. I could have got that right, and it's the end of a long sentence, so now I got to go back and redo it all. This is how it always happens. For those Donnelly fans, yeah, Atlantis, the long book of Atlantis, I think is on our channel there too. It's pretty good. It's pretty cool. Here we are reminded of the bridge Bifrost, spoken of in the last chapter, which, as I have shown, was probably a prolongation of land reaching from Atlantis to Europe, and which the Norse legends tell us sank down under the feet of the forces of Muspelheim in the day of Ragnarok. And thus she spoke with a parched voice, O sovereign of the gods, if thou approvest of this, if I have deserved it, why do thou lightnings linger? Let me, if doomed to perish by the force of fire, perish by thy flames, and alleviate my misfortune by being the author of it. With difficulty indeed do I open my mouth for these very words. Behold my scorched hair, and such a quantity of ashes over my eyes, the drift deposits. So much, too, over my features, and dost thou give this as my recompense, this as the reward of my fertility and my duty, in that I endure wounds from the crooked plough and harrows, and am harassed all the year through, in that I supply green leaves for the cattle, and corn, a wholesome food for mankind, and frankincense for yourselves. But still, suppose I am deserving of destruction. Why have the waves deserved this? Why has thy brother, Neptune, deserved it? Why do the seas delivered to him by lot decrease, and why do they recede still further from the sky? But if regard neither for thy brother nor myself influences thee, still have consideration for thy own skies. Look around on either side, see how each pole is smoking. If the fire shall injure them, thy palace will fall in ruins. See, Atlas himself is struggling, and hardly can he bear the glowing heavens on his shoulders. If the sea, if the earth, if the palace of heaven perish, we are then jumbled into the Let me redo that one again. If the sea, if the earth, if the palace of heaven if the sea, if the earth, if the palace of heaven perish, we are then jumbled into the old chaos again. Save it from the flames, if aught still survives, and provide the preservation of the universe. Thus spoke the earth, nor indeed could she any longer endure the vapor, nor say more, and she withdrew her face within herself, and the caverns neighboring to the shades below. But the omnipotent Father, having called the gods above to witness, and him too, who had given the chariot to Phaeton, that unless he gives assistance all things will perish in direful ruin, mounts aloft to the highest eminence, from which he is wont to spread the clouds over the spacious earth, and from which he moves his thunders and hurls the brandished lightnings. But then he had neither clouds could check. But then he had neither clouds that he could draw over the earth, nor showers that he could pour down from the sky. That is to say, so long as the great meteor shone in the air, and for some time after the heat was too intense to permit the formation of either clouds or rain, these could only become check. These could only come with coolness and condensation. He thundered aloud and darted the poised lightning from the right ear against the charioteer, and at the same time moment deprived him both of life and his seat, and by his ruthless fires retained. Have to redo that whole sentence again. He thundered. Because it was again the last bit of it. Uh-oh. He thundered aloud and darted the poised lightning from his right ear against the charioteer, and at the same moment deprived him both of life and his seat, and by his ruthless fires restrained the flames. The horses are affrighted, and making a bound in the opposite direction, they shake the yoke from their necks and disengage themselves from the torn harness. In one place lie the reins, in another the axle tree wrenched from the pole, in another part are the spokes of the broken wheels, and the fragments of the chariot torn in pieces are scattered far and wide. But Phaeton, the flames consuming his yellow hair, is hurled headlong, and is borne in a long track through the air, as sometimes a star is seen to fall from the serene sky, although it really has not fallen. Him the great Arandanus receives in a part of the world far distant from his country, and bathes his foaming face. The Hesperian Naiads commit his body, smoking from the three-forked flames, to the tomb, and inscribe these verses on the stone. Here is Phaeton buried, the driver of his father's chariot, which, if he did not manage, still he miscarried in a great attempt. But his wretched father, the sun, had hidden his face, overcast with bitter sorrow. And if only we can believe it, they say that one day passed without the sun, the flames of the fires on the earth afforded light, and there was some advantage in that disaster. As there was no daily return to the sun to mark the time, as there was no daily return of the sun to mark the time, that one day of darkness was probably of long duration. It may have endured for years. Then follows Ovid's description of the morning of Clymene, dead Phaeton, Clymene. Then follows Ovid's description of the morning of Clymene and the daughters of the sun and the naiads for the dead Phaeton. Okay, I'm going to just quickly check this guy too. I think it's Sinus, king of Liguria. Liguria. They're going to say Liguria, but I hate that. It should be Liguria. Let's see what they say. Liguria. Sinus, not Sinus. Sinus of Liguria, of course. Sinus of Liguria. Sinus of Liguria. Sinus, king of Liguria, grieves for Phaeton until he is transformed into a swan, reminding one of the Central American legend, which I shall give hereafter, which states that in that day all men were turned into goslings or geese, a reminiscence, perhaps, of those who saved themselves from the fire by taking refuge in the waters of the seas. Sinus became a new bird. Check. Sinus becomes a new bird, but he trusts himself not to the heavens or the air, as being mindful of the fire unjustly sent from thence. He frequents the pools and the vile lakes, and abhorring fire, he chooses the streams, the very contrary of flames. Meanwhile, the father of Phaeton, the sun, in squalid garb and destitute of his comeliness, just as he is wont to be when he suffers an eclipse of his disk, abhors both the light himself and the day, and gives his mind up to grief, and adds resentment to his sorrow. In other words, the poet is now describing the age of darkness, which, as we have seen, must have followed the conflagration, when the condensing vapor wrapped the world in a vast cloak of cloud. The sun refuses to go again on his daily journey, just as we shall see hereafter in the American legends. He refuses to stir until threatened or coaxed into action. All the deities, says Ovid, stand around the sun as he says such things, and they entreat him with suppliant voice not to determine to bring darkness over the world. At length they induce the enraged and bereaved father to resume his task. But the omnipotent father, Jupiter, surveys the vast walls of heaven and carefully searches that no part, impaired by the violence of the fire, may fall into ruin. After he has seen them to be secure in their own strength, he examines the earth and the works of man. Yet a care for his own Arcadia is more particularly his object. He restores, too, the springs and the rivers that had not yet dared to flow. He gives grass to the earth, green leaves to the trees, and orders the injured forests again to be green. The work of renovation has begun. The condensing moisture renews the springs and rivers. The green mantle of verdure once more covers the earth, and from the waste places the beaten and burned trees put forth new sprouts. The legend ends, like Ragnarok, in a beautiful picture of a regenerated world. Divest this poem from the myth of divest this poem. Check. Divest this poem of the myth of Phaeton, and we have a very faithful tradition of the conflagration of the world caused by the comet. And here comes Zeus, my little cat. Say hi, Zeus. He might be a disturbance here for me. Hey, buddy. Okay, let's see. The cause of the trouble is a something which takes place high in the heavens. It rushes through space. It threatens the stars. It traverses particular constellations. It is disastrous. It has yellow hair. It is associated with great heat. It sets the world on fire. It dries up the seas. It remains our. It sets the world. Check. Okay. Associated with great heat. It sets the world on fire. It sets the world on fire. It dries up the seas. Its remains are scattered over the earth. It covers the earth with ashes. The sun ceases to appear. There is a time when he is, as it were, in eclipse, darkened. After a while, he returns. Verdure comes again upon the earth. The springs and rivers reappear. The world is renewed. During this catastrophe, man has hidden himself, swan-like, in the waters. Or the intelligent children of the earth betake themselves to deep caverns for protection from the conflagration. How completely does all this accord in chronological order and in its details with the Scandinavian legend? And with what reason teaches us must have been the consequences to the earth if a comet had fallen upon it. And the most ancient of the ancient world, the nation that stood farthest back in historic time, the Egyptians, believed that this legend of Phaeton really represented the contact of the earth with a comet. When Solon, the Greek lawgiver, visited Egypt 600 years before the Christian era, he talked with the priests of Sais about the deluge of Deucalion. I quote the following from Plato, Dialogues 11, 517, Timaeus. Thereupon one of the priests, who was of very great age, said, O Solon, Solon, you Hellenes are but children, and there is never an old man who is an Hellene. Solon, hearing this, said, What do you mean? I mean to say, he replied, that in mind you are all young. There is no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor any science which is hoary with age. And I will tell you the reason of this. There have been, and there will be again, many destructions of mankind arising out of many causes. There is a story which even you have preserved, that once upon a time Phaeton, the son of Helios, being there is a story which even check. There is a story which even you have preserved, that once upon a time Phaeton, the son of Helios, having yoked the steeds of his father's chariot, because he was not able to drive them in the path of his father, burnt up all that was upon the earth, and was himself destroyed. I gotta redo that whole thing because of that one mistake. There's There is a story which even you have preserved, that once upon a time Phaeton, the son of Helios, having yoked the steeds in his father's chariot, because he was not able to drive them in the path of his father, burnt up all that was upon the earth, and was himself destroyed by a thunderbolt. Now this has the form of a myth, but really signifies a declination of the bodies moving around the earth and in the heavens, and a great conflagration of things upon the earth recurring at long intervals of time. When this happens, those who live upon the mountains and in dry and lofty places are more liable to destruction than those who dwell by rivers or on the seashore. Chapter 6. Other legends of the conflagration. The first of these, and the most remarkable of all, is the legend of the one. the first. Check. The first of these, and the most remarkable of all, is the legend of one of the Central American nations, preserved not by tradition alone, but committed to writing at some time in the remote past. In the Codex Chimalpopoca, in the that was right. It just doesn't flow. In the Codex Chimalpopoca, one of the sacred books of the Toltecs, the author, speaking of the destruction which took place by fire, says, the third sun, or era, is called Kiatonatua. Kiatonatua. The third. This is how the sausage is made. The third sun, or era, is called Kiatonatua, son of rain, because there fell a rain of fire. All which existed burned, and there fell a rain of gravel. They also narrate that while the sandstone, which we now see scattered about, and the Tetzontli, I'm gonna have to, read that that scientific description. Amygdaloid porus, amygdaloid Tetzontli, amygdaloid porus, trap or basaltic rocks, boiled with great tumult. There also rose the rocks of vermilion color. That is to say, The basaltic and red trap rocks burst through the great cracks made at that time in the surface of the disturbed earth. Let me just check what I did there. Tick battle. Kia Tonatua, Chimapoko. See tick paddle. Tick paddle. Nahui. Kia hoodle. See to paddle. I'm pretty sure that's just see to paddle. Surface of the disturbed earth. See to paddle. Tipple. Tia paddle. See tia paddle. Now this was in the year C. Teopatl one Flint. It was the day Nawa, Kiahudal, Nawa. Now this was in the year Kia. Now this was in the year C. Teopatl one Flint. It was the day Nawa Kiahudal, fourth reign. Now in this day, in which men were lost and destroyed in a rain of fire, they were transformed into goslings. The sun itself was on fire, and everything, together with the houses, was consumed. Here we have the whole story told in little. Fire fell from heaven, the comet. The sun itself was on fire. The comet reached to, or appeared to reach to, the sun, or its head had fallen into the sun, or the terrible object may have been mistaken for the sun on fire. There was a rain of gravel. The drift fell from the comet. There is also some allusion to the sandstones scattered about, and we have another reference to the great breaks in the Earth's crust, caused either by shock of contact with the comet or the electrical disturbances of the time, and we are told that the trap rocks and rocks of vermilion color boiled up to the surface with great tumult. Mankind was destroyed except such as fled into the seas and lakes, and there plunged into the water and lived like goslings. Can anyone suppose that this primitive people invented all this? And if they did, how comes it that their invention agreed so exactly with the traditions of all the rest of mankind, and with the revelations of science as to the relations between the trap rocks and the gravel, as to time at least? We turn now to the legends of a different race and a different stage of cultivation, the barbarian Indians of California and Nevada. It is a curious and wonderful story. The natives in the vicinity of Lake Tahoe ascribe its origin to a great natural convulsion. There was a time, they say, when their tribe possessed the whole earth and were strong, numerous, and rich. But a day came in which the people rose up stronger than they and defeated and enslaved them. Afterward, the Great Spirit sent an immense wave across the continent from the sea, and this wave engulfed both the oppressors and the oppressed, all but a very small remnant. Then the taskmasters made the remaining people raise up a great temple, so that they, of the ruling caste, should have a refuge in case of another flood. And on top of this temple, the masters worshipped a column of perpetual fire. It would be natural to suppose that this was the great deluge to which all the legends of mankind refer, and which I have supposed elsewhere to refer to the destruction of Atlantis. But it must be remembered that both east and west of the Atlantic, the traditions of mankind refer to several deluges, to a series of catastrophes, occurring at times far apart. It may be that the legend of the Tower of Babel refers to an event far anterior in time to the deluge of Noah or Deucalion, or it may be, as often happens, that the chronology of this legend has been inverted. The Tahoe legend continues. Half a moon had not elapsed, however, before the earth was again troubled, this time with strong convulsions and thunderings, upon which the masters took refuge in their great tower, closing the people out. The poor slaves fled to the Humboldt River, and getting into canoes, paddled for life from the awful sight behind them, for the land was tossing like a troubled sea, and casting up fire, smoke, and ashes. The flames went up to the very heavens and melted many stars, so that they rained down in molten metal upon the earth, forming the ore, gold, that white men seek. The Sierra was mounted Sierra was mounted. All right. Okay. Let's see where we are. Let's get it up high there. Mounded up. The Sierra was mounded up from the bosom of the earth, while the place where the great fort stood sank, leaving only the dome on the top exposed above the waters of Lake Tahoe. The Sierra was mounded up from the bosom of the earth, while the place where the great fort stood sank, leaving only the dome on the top exposed above the waters of Lake Tahoe. The inmates of the Temple Tower. The inmates of the Temple Tower clung to this dome to save themselves from drowning. But the Great Spirit walked upon the waters in his wrath and took the oppressors one by one, like pebbles, and threw them far into the recesses of a great cavern on the east side of the lake, called to this day the Spirit Lodge, where the waters shut them in. There must they remain till the last great volcanic burning, which is to overturn the whole earth, is to again set them free. In the depths of their cavern prison, they may still be heard, wailing and moaning when the snows melt and the waters swell in the lake. Here we have the usual mingling of fact and myth. The legend describes accurately, no doubt, the awful appearance of the tossing earth and the falling fire and debris, the people flying to rivers and taking shelter in the caves, and some of them closed up in the caves forever. The legend, as is usual, accommodates itself to the geography and topography of the country in which the narratives live. Come on, Graham. The legend. Check. The legend, as is usual, accommodates itself to the geography and topography of the country in which the narrators live. In the Aztec creation myths, as preserved by the Fray Andre de Olmos, Andre de Olmos. In the Aztec creation myths, as preserved by the Fray Andre de Olmos and taken down by him from the lips of those whose narrate. Come on. In the Aztec creation myths, as preserved by the Fray Andre de Olmos and taken down by him from the lips of those who narrated the Aztec traditions to him, we have an account of the destruction of mankind by the sun, which reads as follows. The sun had risen indeed, and with the glory of the cruel fire about him, that not even the eyes of the gods could endure. But he moved not. There he lay on the horizon. And when the deities sent Tlotli, their messenger, to him, with orders that he should go upon his way, his ominous answer was that he would never leave that place till he had destroyed and put an end to them all. Then a great fear fell upon some, while others were moved only to anger. And among the others was one Sitli. And among the others. Check. And among the others was one Sitli, who immediately strung his bow and advanced against the glittering enemy. But quickly lowering his head, the sun avoided the first arrow shot at him, but the second and third had attained his body in quick succession, when, filled with fury, he seized the last and launched it back upon his assailant. Excuse me. And the brave Seatly laid shaft to string nevermore, for the arrow of the sun pierced his forehead. Then all was dismay in the assembly of the gods, and despair filled their hearts, for they saw that they could not prevail against the Shining One, and they agreed to die and to cut themselves open through the breast. Zalot was appointed minister, and he killed his companions one by one, and last of all he slew himself also. Immediately after the death of the gods, the sun began his motion in the heavens. Oh boy. Tetzcoatl. Tetzcoatl. I know that one, but now who it's Teku Tekuzitzcatl. Tekuzitz. All right, I'm gonna just double check these two. Tetzcoatl. This is a little different than the other one that I used to have to pronounce. Tetzcoatl. Nawaddle, Nana Watson, Teku, Sisticatl, Teku Sisticatl, Tezcoat says Tecatl. Tezcoat says Tecatl. The sun began his motion in the heavens. Nana Watson. Oh boy. Okay. Teku Tecatl. And a man called Tetsukis. Oh boy. And a man called Tekusis Tecatl. Tekusis Tecatl. And a man called Tekusis Tecatl, or Tekuses Tecatl, who, when Nana Watson leaped into the fire, had retired into a cave, now emerged from its concealment as the moon. Others say that instead of going into a cave, this Tekusis Tecatl had leaped into the fire after Nana Watson, but that the heat of the fire being somewhat abated, he had come out less brilliant than the sun. Still another variation is that the sun and moon came equally Check. Okay, you ready for that? Still another variation is that the sun and moon came out equally bright, but this not seeming good to the gods. Still another variation is that the sun and moon came out equally bright, but this not seeming good to the gods, one of them took a rabbit by the heels and slung it into the face of the moon, dimming its luster with a blotch whose mark may be seen to this day. Here we have the same titanic battle between the gods, the godlike men of old, the old ones, and the comet, which appears in the Norse legends when Odin, Thor, Frey, Tyr, right? Here we have this. Oh, that's annoying. Heimdall. Here we have the same titanic battle between the gods like Here we have the same titanic battle between the gods, the godlike men of old, the old ones, and the comet, which appears in the Norse legends when Odin, Thor, Frey, Tyr, and Heimdall bodily march out to encounter the comet and fall dead, like Seatly before the weapons or the poisonous breath of the monster. In the same way we see in Hesiod the great Jove rising high on Olympus and smiting Typhon with his lightnings. And we shall see this idea of a conflict between the gods and the great demon occurring all through the legends. And it may be that the three arrows of this American story represent the three comets spoken of in Hesiod, and the Fenris wolf, Midgard's serpent, and Surt or Garm of the Goths. The first arrow did not strike the sun, the second and the third attained its body, and then the enraged sun launched the last arrow back at Seatly at the earth, and thereupon despair filled the people, and they prepared to die. The Avesta, the sacred book of the ancient Persians, written in the Zend dialect, tells the same story. I have already given one version of it. Ahura Mazda is the good god, the king. Ahura Mazda is the good god, the kind creator of life and growth. He sent the sun the fertilizing rain. He created for the ancestors of the Persians a beautiful land, a paradise, a warm and fertile country. But Ahriman, the genius of evil, created Azidaka. But Ahriman, the genius of evil, created Azidahaka, the biting snake of winter. He had triple jaws, 3 heads, 6 eyes, the strength of 1,000 beings. He brings rain and winter on the fair land. Then comes a mighty hero, Forteana, who kills the snake and rescues the land. In the Persian legends, we have Feridun, the hero of Shah Nama. There is a serpent king called Zohak, who has committed dreadful crimes assisted by a demon called Iblis. As his reward, Iblis asks permission to kiss the king's shoulder, which was granted. Then from the shoulder sprang 2 dreadful serpents. Iblis told him that these must be fed every day with the brains of 2 children. Then Feridun, beautiful and strong, rose up and killed the serpent king Zohak and delivered his country. Zohak is the same as Azidahaka. Azidahaka. And delivered Azidahaka. Azidahaka. Zohak is the same as Azidahaka in the Avesta, the biting snake of winter. He is Python. He is Typhon. He is the Fenris wolf. He is the Midgard serpent. The Persian fire worship is based on the primeval recognition of the value of light and fire growing out of this age of darkness and winter. In the legends of the Hindus, we read of the fight between Rama, the sun god. Ra was the Egyptian god of the sun, and Ravana, a giant who, accompanied by the Rakshasas, or demons, made terrible times in the ancient land where the ancestors of the Hindus dwelt at that period. He carries away the wife of Rama, Sita. Her name signifies a furrow and seems to refer to agriculture and an agricultural race inhabiting the furrowed earth. He bears her struggling through the air. Rama and his allies pursue him. The monkey god Hanuman helps Rama. A bridge of stone 60 miles long is built across the deep ocean to the islands of Lanka, where the great battle is fought. The stones which crop out through southern India are said to have been dropped by the monkey builders. The army crosses on the bridge as the forces of Muspelheim on the Norse legends marched over the bridge Bifrost. The army crosses on the bridge as the forces of Muspelheim on the Norse legends marched over the bridge. Muspelheim. The army crosses on the bridge as the forces of Muspelheim and the Norse legends marched over the bridge Bifrost. The battle is a terrible one. Ravana has 10 heads, and as fast as Rama cuts off one, another grows in its place. Finally, Rama, like Apollo, fires the terrible arrow of Brahma, the creator, and the monster falls dead. Gods and demons are watching the contest from the sky, and flowers fall down in showers on the victorious hero. The body of Ravana is consumed by fire. Sita, the furrowed earth, goes through the ordeal of fire and comes out of it purified and redeemed from all taint of the monster Ravana. And Rama, the sun, and Sita, the earth, are separated for 14 years. Sita is hid in the dark jungle, and then they are married again and live happily together ever after. Here we have the battle in the air between the sun and the demon. The earth is taken possession of by the demon. Here we have the battle in the air between the sun and the demon. The earth is taken possession of by the demon. Why am I having a hard time with that sentence? Here we have the fire. Here we have the battle in the air between the sun and the demon. The earth is taken possession of by the demon. The demon is finally consumed by fire and perishes. The earth goes through an ordeal of fire, a conflagration, and for 14 years the earth and sun do not see each other. The earth is hid in a dark jungle. But eventually the sun returns, and the loving couple are again married and live happily forever after. The Phoebos Apollo of the Greek legend was, Byron tells us, the lord of the unerring bow, the god of life and poetry of light, the sun in human limbs arrayed and brow, all radiant from his triumph in the fight. True shaft had just been shot, the arrow bright, with an immortal's vengeance. In his eye and nostril beautiful disdain and might and majesty flash their full lightnings by, developing in that one glance the deity. This fight so magnificently This fight, so magnificently described, was the sun god's battle with Python, the destroyer, the serpent, the dragon, the comet. What was Python doing? He was stealing the springs and fountains. That is to say, the great heat was drying up the watercourses of the earth. The arrow bright with an immortal's vengeance was the shaft with which Apollo broke the fiend to pieces and tumbled him down to the earth and saved the springs and the clouds and the perishing ocean. When we turn to America, the legends tell us of the same great battle between good and evil, between light and darkness. Manabozho, or the great Hare Nana, is, in the Algonquin legends, the white one, the light, the sun. His foe was the glittering prince of serpents, the comet. Among the Iroquois, according to the Jesuit missionary Father Brebeuf, who resided among the Hurons in 1626, there was a legend of two brothers, Iasoka, Iaskia, Tewiskara. There was a legend of two brothers, Iasoka, who resided among the Excuse me. Among the check, check. All right, sorry about that. I'm just having a little coughing fit there. Ioskia, Tawiskara. Among the Iroquois, according to the Jesuit missionary Father Brebeuf, who resided among the Hurons in 1626, there was a legend of two brothers, Ioskeha and Tawiskara, which mean, in the Oneida dialect, the white one, the light, the sun, and the dark one, the night. They were twins born of a virgin mother who died in giving them life. Their grandmother was the moon, the water deity, called Atuizak, Atu, At, Atusik, Atusik. Their grandmother was the moon. Their grandmother. All right, I'm gonna have to check the pronunciation of that one. I don't even know if they're gonna know that. My assistant will know that. Is that an E or a C? That's a C. At acoustic. Atakusik. Atakusik. Atakusik, yep. I should have just went with it. Life. Atakusik. Their grandmother was the moon, the water deity called Atakusik, a word which signifies she bathes herself, derived from the word for water. The brothers quarreled and finally came to blows, the former using the horns of a stag, the latter the wild rose. He of the weaker weapon He of the weaker weapon was very naturally discomfited and sorely wounded. Fleeing for life, the blood gushed from him at every step, and as it fell, turned into flint stones. The victor returned to his grandmother in the Far East and established his lodge on the brothers. The vic- Check. The victor returned to his grandmother in the Far East and established his lodge on the borders of the great ocean whence the sun comes. In time, he became the father of mankind and special guardian of the Iroquois. The earth was at first arid and sterile, but he destroyed the gigantic frog which had swallowed all the waters and guided the torrents into smooth streams and lakes. The woods he stocked with game, and having learned from the great tortoise who supports the world how to make fire, taught his children, the Indians, this indispensable art. Check. Sometimes they spoke of him as the sun, but this is only figuratively. Here we have the light and darkness, the sun and night battling with each other. The sun fights with a younger brother, another luminary, the comet. The comet is broken up, it flies for life, the red blood, the red clay streaming from it, and flintstones appearing on the earth wherever the blood, the clay falls. The victorious sun reestablishes himself in the east, and then the myth of the sun merges into the legends concerning a great people who were the fathers of mankind who dwelt in the east on the borders of the great eastern ocean, the Atlantic. The earth was at first arid and sterile, covered with debris and stones, but the returning sun, the white one, destroys the gigantic fog, covered with debris. But the returning check. But the returning sun, the white one, destroys the gigantic frog, emblem of cold and water, the great snows and ice deposits. This frog had swallowed all the waters. That is to say, the falling rains had been congealed in these great snowbanks and glaciers. The sun melts them and kills the frog. The waters pour forth in deluging floods. Manabozho guides the torrents into smooth streams and lakes. The woods return and become once more full of animal life. Then the myth again mixes up the sun and the sunland in the east. From this sunland, represented as a tortoise, always the emblem of an island, the Iroquois derive the knowledge of how to make fire. This coming of the monster, his attack upon and conquest of the sun, his apparent swallowing of that orb are all found represented on both sides of the Atlantic, on the walls of temples and in great earth mounds, in the image of a gigantic serpent holding a globe in its mouth. This long trailing object in the skies was probably the origin of that primeval serpent worship found all over the world, and hence the association of the serpent in so many religions with the evil one. In itself, the serpent should no more represent moral wrong than the lizard, the crocodile, or the frog. But the hereditary abhorrence with which he is regarded by mankind extends to no other created thing. He is the image of the great destroyer, the wronger, the enemy. Let us turn to another legend. Okay, I'm just going to check here. I think I might have to call it. This chapter is not going to finish. 175. Let me just see how long it is here. This is going to the Brazil chapter there. I wonder how hard the pronunciations are going to be in this chapter. Yeah, this is too long. It still goes on and on and on. 175. So let's see here. Maybe I can keep going for a little longer just to make sure I get the last half of that chapter in the next one. Let's see here. Aaron Magi. Let me check a couple things here. Let's see. Aaron Magi with an accent. E with an accent. My guess is Aaron Magi. Irene Mage. Irene Mage. Monan. Monan. That's right. Monau. Okay. I'm going to just go for a little while longer here. Let us turn to another legend. Check. An ancient authority giving the following legend of the Tupi Indians of Brazil. Monan, without beginning or end, author of all that is, seeing the ingratitude of men. Is that a U? I think that's a U. Is that a U? No, is it a U? Well, now I think it's. I think I'm gonna have to redo that. I think that's a U that looks like an N. Unless he changes, things destroyed spoke thus to Monau. It's got to be Monau. Monau. Monau without beginning. Monau without beginning or end. Author of all that is, seeing the ingratitude of men and their contempt for him who had made them thus joyous, withdrew from them and sent upon them Tata, the divine fire, which burned all that was on the surface of the earth. He swept about the fire in such a way that in places he raised mountains and in others dug valleys. Of all men, one alone. Irene Mage. Of all men. Check. Of all men, one alone, Irene Mage, was saved, whom Monau carried into the heaven. He, seeing all things destroyed, spoke thus to Monau: Wilt thou also destroy the heavens and their garniture? Wilt thou also destroy the heavens and their garniture? Alas, henceforth they will. Wilt thou also destroy the heavens and their garniture? Alas, henceforth where will be our home? Why should I live, since there is none other of my kind? Then Monau was so filled with pity that he poured a deluging rain on the earth, which quenched the fire, and flowed on all sides, forming the ocean, which we call the Purana, the great waters. The prayer of Irian Maja, when he calls on God to save the garniture of the heavens, reminds one vividly of the prayer of the earth in Ovid. It might be inferred that heaven meant in the Tupi legend that heavenly land, not the skies. This is rendered the more probable because we find Irin asking where he should dwell if heaven is destroyed. This could scarcely allude to the spiritual heaven. And here I would note a singular coincidence. The fire that fell from heaven was the divine Tata. In Egypt, the name of deity was Tata, or Ptah, which signified father. This became in the Hebrew Yahya, which we derive the root of Yah, Yehovah. And this word is found in many languages in Europe and America, and even in our own as Dada, daddy, father, The Tupi Tata was fire from the Supreme Father. Who can doubt the oneness of the human race when millions of threads of tradition and language thus cross each other through it in all directions, like the web of a mighty fabric? We cross from one continent to another, from the torrid Spart. Check. We cross from one continent to another, from the torrid part of South America to the frozen regions of North America, and the same legend meets us. The Takulis of British Columbia believe that the earth was formed by a muskrat, who, diving into the universal sea, brought up the land in his mouth and spit it out until he had formed quite an island, and by degrees the whole earth. Who, diving into the Tecumseh, Takulis. The Takulis of British Columbia believed that the earth was formed by a muskrat who, diving into the universal sea, brought up the land in his mouth and spit it out until he had formed quite an island and, by degrees, the whole earth. In some unexplained way, this earth became afterward peopled in every part, and it remained until a fierce fire of several days' duration swept over it, destroying all life, with two exceptions. One man and one woman hid themselves in a deep cave in the heart of a mountain, and from these two has the world since been repeopled. Brief as is this narrative, it preserves the natural sequence of events. First, the world is made, then it becomes peopled in every part, then a fierce fire sweeps over it for several days, consuming all life, except two persons who save themselves by hiding in a deep cave. And from these, the world is repeopled. How wonderfully does all this resemble the Scandinavian story? It has oftentimes been urged by the skeptical, when legends of Noah's flood were found among rude races, that they had been derived from Christian missionaries. But these myths cannot be accounted for in this way, for the missionaries did not teach that the world was once destroyed by fire and that a remnant of mankind escaped by taking refuge in a cave. Although, as we shall see, such a legend really appears in several places hidden in the leaves of the Bible itself. We have the remote north and pass down the Pacific coast until we encounter the Ute Indians in California and Utah. This is their legend. Oh, is that Utah? Ute? Or... All right, I got it. This is their legend. Check. The Ute philosopher declares the sun to be a living personage and explains his passage across the heavens along an appointed way by giving an account of a fierce personal conflict between Tavi, the sun god, and Tawats, one of the supreme gods of his mythology. In that long ago, the time of which all mythology refers, the sun roamed the earth at will. When he came too near with his fierce heat, the people were scorched, and when he hid away in his cave for a long time, too idle to come forth, the night was long and the earth cold. Once upon a time, Tawats, the hair god, was sitting with his family by the campfire in the solemn woods, anxiously awaiting for the return of Tavi, the wayward sun god. Wearied with long watching, the hair god fell asleep, and the sun god came so near that he scorched the naked shoulder of Tawats. Foreseeing the vengeance which could be thus... Check. Foreseeing the vengeance which would be thus provoked, he fled back to his cave beneath the earth. Tawats awoke in great anger and speedily determined to go and fight the sun god. After a long journey of many adventures, the hair god came to the brink of the earth, and there watched long and patiently till at last the sun god coming out, he shot an arrow at his face. But the fierce heat consumed the arrow ere it had finished its intended course. Then another arrow was sped, but that was also consumed, and another, and still another, until only one remained in his quiver. But this was the magical arrow that had never failed its mark. Tawat's, holding it in his hand, lifted the barb to his eye and baptized it in a divine tear. Then the arrow was sped and struck the sun god full in the face, and the sun was shivered into 1,000 fragments, which fell to the earth, causing a general conflagration. Then Tawat, the hair god, fled before the destruction he had wrought, and as he fled, the burning earth consumed its feet, consumed his legs, consumed his body, consumed his hands and his arms. All were consumed but the head alone, which bowled across valleys and over mountains, fleeing destruction from the burning earth, until at last, swollen with heat, the eyes of the god burst and the tears gushed forth in a flood, which spread over the earth and extinguished the fire. The sun god was now conquered, and he appeared before a council of the gods to await sentence. In that long council were established the days and the nights, the seasons and the years, with the length thereof, and the sun was condemned to travel across the firmament by the same. That sucks. Just lost my voice there at the end of that council. It's time to wrap it up. In that long council were established the days and the nights, the seasons and the years, with the length thereof, and the sun was condemned to travel across the firmament by the same trail day after day till the end of time. Here we have the succession of arrows or comets found in the legend of the Aztecs, and here as before it was the last arrow that destroys the sun. And here again we have the conflagration, the fragments of something falling on the earth, the long absence of the sun, the great rains, and the cold. Let us shift the scene again. All right, that's all I can do. Thank you for watching and listening, like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Good to see a fan of Ignatius here. And yeah, go back and check out all the other stuff too. And thank you very much for being here.